Hello and welcome to another YouTube tutorial with me, Tim. Today we're going to be having a look at how to get 3D animations into Unity and use variables to control those animation states. The first thing we're going to want to have, though, for use in our 3D platformer game is some animations. You might have animations that you've already made, but what I would suggest doing is start by using these generic Mixamo animations that I'm going to show you where to get from the internet, implement them, and then see if you do have animations that we've already created, then can you import your own animations to replace the animations with first. So sort of like utilize the animations that I know will work, and then once you've got that working, you can try implementing your own animations if you have them. And if you don't have them, then it's certainly something that you guys will be working towards in other people's classes, like in Shauna's class, with creating a character for movement for your 3D platformer. So this is what we have at the moment from the last tutorial. We can move around our character and we can jump. So all looking good, but at the moment we've just got this little cylinder. So let's try and make the first steps towards getting our animated character. Now there's basically two parts to an animated character. We need the actual model and the model to be rigged, and then we need the animations to apply to that model and rig. I'm not going to teach you stuff about models and rigs and animations because that'll be something you can learn in other people's classes. Instead, I'm going to just look at how to implement it into Unity. Now, to get some generic animations and some character models that are correctly rigged already, we can go ahead and use this site called Mixamo, which is something that actually some professional developers have used in the past as well. To access this site Mixamo, you will have to make an account, but one of the options you can use is just to sign in with your Google site when it asks you to sign up. You can just log in with your Google account. So there's two different things up in the top left hand corner here, and the site might be quite laggy for you, but we've got characters and animations. The first thing we're going to want to do is go to our character and pick one of these characters. We can pick any of these characters to be the main character for now, for our jumping platform. The idea is that all of the animations will work with all of the same characters. In this case, I chose this little girl character because I thought that she fits the aesthetic of our platformer game quite nicely. Once I go ahead and click the download button with this selected, I want to go ahead and select FBX for Unity. Though to be honest, actually the normal FBX is fine as well. T-Pose is fine for downloading. So I've already downloaded these so that you don't have to wait for me to download them. But basically this is the model that we have. The next thing we're going to want to do is download our animations. Now, you'll want an idle animation and a running animation to start with. This is to test our implementation of animations, because what we want to do is have our character have an idle animation, which is when they're standing still, and then we're going to blend that animation into a running animation. Apologies for this laggy animation that sort of is flashing in front of your eyes probably. So I'm going to go ahead and type in idle, and we want something that's like a proper idle, nothing too fancy. So I quite like this idle here because it's almost like the character isn't doing that much at all. We could also choose any of these other idols. Some of them are a bit more excited about not doing anything, but ultimately we just want to download one of those. And whenever we do go ahead and click on one of these, like for example this idle here, we're going to go ahead and click download. And this time what we're going to want to do is, again, FBX for Unity, and we're going to do skin without skin, and that's just because we're downloading the animation. We don't actually want the model with the animation this time. We just want the animation, and then leave everything else. 30 frames per second is fine, keyframe reduction none. So go ahead and download that, and then finally you're going to want to get a running animation as well. The reason that I want to blend between running and idle and not idle and walking is because usually you want to be moving around quite fast in the kind of 3D platformer that we're making. So I kind of want a running animation to blend to, so that we can keep our character move speed quite fast without it looking totally terrible. So one of these running animations is fine. I think I went for this particular animation here. And then again, you want to just go ahead and download it without skin, FBX for Unity, etc. So I've gone ahead and downloaded them down here at the bottom, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and open up, I'm going to close this then, and open up my downloads folder. And you can see here are my models and animations. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag those in. I have downloaded this one twice. That's fine. I'm going to drag these ones into my assets in my Unity project. So now I have these assets in my Unity project. I have this here, which is the character model with the T-pose. And then there's no preview at the moment for the idle or running animation, because remember, we downloaded them without downloading the extra model with each one, which would be pointless. One thing we can do is try to import the materials from the model itself. At the moment, we don't have any materials for this model. That's why it's just totally white in the preview. So I'm going to go to materials and change this from use embedded materials to use external materials legacy. And whenever I apply, this is going to use a legacy format, which is not really a very good idea, but ultimately it's fine for what we're doing here, which is just taking the materials from the model itself. And this will probably come up with a reference like this that says there's a normal map that's using a texture. A normal map, blah, 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 must be marked as a normal map in the import settings. We're just going to go ahead and fix now if that comes up. And now look, we've got our character with the lovely bright colors that the design is supposed to have. So we're going to want to replace our character with our model, but the secret to understanding how animations work is most of the time you have two different things. You have your code that is working to move the character around, which is the code we already have, and then we have the animations which are responding now. There are some games, like you may have noticed if you're playing a game like GTA or Red Dead Redemption, there are some games that are called animation driven, which means that the animations actually determine the physics of the player movement. But most games just have basically the visuals of the character moving, and then they have a secret actual character creation, character movement behind that. So we're going to do this for our particular prototype. So we're going to keep this cylinder that jumps around and uses the collision of the cylinder. And what we're going to go ahead and do is just hide the visuals of this cylinder, and also these little boxes I made up here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the cube and untick the mesh renderer on this cube, untick the mesh renderer on this temporary head thing that I had as well, and untick the mesh renderer on this. So now there's basically no player character to be seen, but it's still there, right? The collider is still working the same way. It's just that they're invisible now. So we're going to replace that invisible player character with this new model. So I'm going to go ahead and drag my model that I had and drag it in to the scene beside the player. At the moment, it's the wrong scale and the wrong position. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and turn back on my mesh renderer for the collider of the cylinder, just so that I can position the character and create the right scale for them and make them face the right direction as well. So I can see here that the scale is should be 2 on all axes. That looks about right for the scale of my player character at the moment. I'm going to position them so that their feet are on the bottom. It looks like maybe they could be a 2.5 scale in general here. Yeah, that looks about right. And then I also want to make sure that my player character is facing the same position that my player is. So I'm going to turn back on this cube just so that I can make sure, yep, that's where the head is supposed to be. So now that I've got that sorted, I'm going to turn off my mesh renderers again. And then to make sure that my player character sort of moves around as I move around my character, I'm going to go ahead and drag my player character model that I've now got inside the player game object that's moving around. And now whenever I move my character around, they're in this T-pose, but it kind of looks like I'm moving around this actual character model now. And you might need to make some tweaks to make sure that their feet, aren't going through the floor and things like that. But for now, that's fine. We've got our character in a T-pose. So now we have to think about how we can animate our character. If I go ahead and click on this idle animation, then you can see at the top here where we've got models, rig, animation, and materials, I can click on animation and I can see this idle clip that I have. And if I play it, at the moment, there's no preview. However, let's go ahead and preview this by using the import systems to make these all use the same rig. So in Unity, there's this thing called a generic humanoid rig. At the moment, these animations aren't really sharing anything, so it's hard to slap one animation on another model. However, if we use the rig of the humanoid, then that's when it becomes a lot easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on my player model, I'm going to go ahead and click on the rig here, and I'm going to change my animation type from generic to humanoid. I'm going to keep all my other settings the same and apply. And now it will create a generic humanoid rig that is set to the normal rig of this imported model. And I'm going to do the same thing for my two animations. This one's going to be humanoid as well. And this one's going to be humanoid as well, from generic to humanoid. So I've applied these all, and now whenever I go to my animation of my idle, I can see my idle animation can be played with this default preview Unity character. And I can do the same thing with my running animation as well. With the animation tab here, I can now play my running animation. And because they both use, and now because both of the animations and my model are all using the same humanoid generic rig, I'm able to apply the animations to this model. So let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, we're going to need an animation controller. Now you can see whenever I drag this object, this model into the scene, it automatically created this animator so that it can be animated. However, it doesn't have an animated controller. This controller says none, runtime animator controller. So we're going to go ahead and right click on assets, create animation controller. And this we can call, player anim controller or something like that. It doesn't really matter what we call it. But once we've created it, we're going to drag it in, and it's got this funny symbol here, and we're going to drag it in, and now we've set this animation controller. And finally, I'm going to double click on the animation controller, and we can now see in our view, we've got this special animator window. And I'm going to scroll out just a little bit. And this is how we can set up our animation states so that the animations can swap between different ones. For now, we're going to take this entry node, which is where our animation state starts for this character, and we're going to create a new state from blend tree. And this will automatically create a connection from the entry point to this blend tree. Because this is the only animation state we have at the moment, the animation state is immediately going to go to this new one, and so this is basically the very first animation state that the game will be in for this character when the game starts. Whenever because this is a blend tree, if I double click on it, I can enter further into the matrix. Basically, I can go further into the inception, so I can go for the base layer here, double click on the blend tree, and now I'm at the blend tree. And if I click on the blend tree in my inspector window, I can now see this blend tree. So what is a blend tree? Well, the reason I'm using a blend tree is because I want to blend between two different animations. I want to blend between the idle animation and the running animation, so that if you're running a bit, then you'll sort of have an animation that's halfway between being idle and running. And you'll see what I mean when we implement it. It's a sort of spectrum from 0 to 1 along this axis here of the blend, and we need to blend between two motions. So once I've selected blend tree, and remember, so if we're at our base layer, that means double clicking on this and then additionally clicking on this blend tree here. We now in our inspector window can add motion. So I'm going to go to this motion here and click on this plus symbol, add motion field. And this is going to be the idle animation. So if I go ahead, oops, that's not what I meant to do. If I go ahead and click here on this little arrow and this little dot here, then I can access all of these different animations. So I'm going to say idle is the animation I want for the first motion. And then I'm going to add another one so that it blends from idle. And you'll see this blend now has appeared. We're going to change this from idle to running. And you can see now in the preview, if I start playing the preview here, with the value of blend at 0, the character is idle, and with the blend at 1, they're running. So any of these values in between will blend between these two animations. So at a very low number, he sort of starts running, and then he starts to run faster and faster as it gets closer to 1. Some of these blends look a bit funny. It's a kind of funny walk at the moment, but for now it will do better than just snapping between these two animations. So if we go ahead and run the game now, hopefully our character will be in idle, which is good. But whenever we move around, they're just going to continue. She's just going to continue to be in idle no matter what we do. So we need to change the value of our blend. The blend at the moment is being changed by this blend value, and we can look at our parameters here on the left hand side of our animator, click parameters, and you can see there's the name of this parameter is called blend. We're going to use code to change the value of that blend depending on how much we're moving. So I'm going to go and open up my player controller in Visual Studio. And the first thing we're going to want to do is make a variable so that we can access the animator. So I'm going to go public animator, not animation. And this will be our, I don't know, anim controller. And that will be the name of the variable. And now we can go ahead and build that. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-B, or you can also just save it as well. But sometimes saving doesn't work. You have to compile it with Control-Shift-B, or I can also go here to build solution. Either way, I now have this variable down here, anim controller, which is none animator. So I'm going to go ahead and drag in my player character model with the animator component attached. So now it's referencing this animator component here, which in turn has the controller inside it. So now the next thing we're going to want to do is set the value of the parameter of this anim controller. So I'm going to copy this variable name here, and we'll just do this every update. Or wait, where shall we do it? We'll do it where we move. So whenever we move, that's when we want to set our animation as well. This is where we move here. So we can see our new movement input is equal to this new value. And then this is what we're using to change our forward rotation as well. And where do we set the velocity? Here we do here. So body focus dot velocity is also equal to new velocity. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is determine the new value, which is as a float from 0 to 1, which is going to be equal to how much we're moving. Now, how much we're moving is equal to our move value dot magnitude. Remember here we were trying to use magnitude to work out how fast we were moving, like this movement input dot magnitude. Well, now we can use this dot magnitude to work out how fast we're moving for the sake of our animation as well as our rotation. So I'm going to go ahead and say float animation running speed is equal to this movement input dot magnitude. But movement input doesn't exist yet, so hang on. Let me put it down below where we created this. Here it is, movement input is equal to those things. So let's put it here. So there we go. So we're saying that this is equal to the magnitude of our movement dot input. And now that we've got the magnitude, which is basically like by what multitude are we multiplying our vector, like how much are we moving? So 0 magnitude is going to be we're not moving at all. 1 is going to be we're moving quite a lot, and we might have to tweak this, but this is what I'm going to try to start with. And then for our controller, anim controller, now we can't just do anim controller dot blend, which is the name of this variable, and that's because even though it's a variable, it's actually a variable inside a parameter, which means we have to go use a method instead, which is called set float, and we're going to go ahead and set float. This will take two arguments. The first is the index of the parameter. In this case, I'm going to say blend as a string, which will be the name of the parameter we want to change, and then the value, which is going to be this value here, our animation running speed. So I'm going to build this and see if it works out. We might have to tweak the value that we're inputting. So here I'm not running at all, and the value of my blend is 0. So I'm on idle, but whenever I start running, well, my character, she's sort of running, but she's also frozen. So it's almost working. The problem is that our animations aren't looping. So yes, the character starts to use the run animation whenever they're running and goes back to the idle. So that's good. And there's a nice little blend between them. You can see here, whoop, it's not instant. It's blending depending on how much I'm moving. And with a controller, I can also move my stick slightly to the left. And now my value is in between not moving and running. And that's all looking good. However, what I'm going to have to do is make sure that my animations are looping. So I'm going to click on my idle animation here. And with this animation tab selected, I'm going to look at scroll down to this idle animation. And there's this little button here called loop time on this idle animation. And I'm just going to go ahead and tick this so that it automatically knows that this animation should loop over and over again. So I'm going to go apply. And we're going to want to loop our running animation as well. So I'm going to click on this running, go to my animation tab, go down to this running, and then click on loop time. Once I have those both applied, I can run the game again. And now my character is, well, something else crazy is happening here. We're moving and we're looping the animation, but our character is also now sort of leaving themselves. They're having an out-of-body experience. Whereas what we really want is for our character to run on the spot, but be moved by the character controller. Because you can see now that my player has been moving, they're sort of some distance away from the point, whereas really we want them to be running on the spot. And the reason this is happening is because we've got apply root motion here. Root motion is kind of that thing I was telling you about GTA and Red Dead Redemption, where the animation determines how fast you move. In this case, I'm going to turn off root motion because we're not using the animations to actually move the character. It's more the other way around. We're moving the character, which in turn is causing the animation. So what you'll notice is that now our character is running correctly. I mean, we still don't have jumping working yet, but we've got our animations. It sort of looks like they're running more slowly than they should be. So I might have to tweak my movement speed. And my movement speed is 400 at the moment. If I put it up to 500, maybe it will look more natural because I'll be moving the correct speed relative to the particular animation that I chose. And you can also run the character's speed at a different animation speed. Like if I go back to my animator by clicking here, double clicking on this, I could go to my running inspector here on the blend tree, and I could change this. This is the speed here of the animation. So if I wanted the character to run slightly slower, I could change this from 1 to 0.8, for example. And now my character would run the animations more slowly. It sort of looks like they're in slow motion now, but ultimately you can tweak those values to your heart's content, right? So that they match up. With this particular method of animating our character, we want to have the animation speed of the run, which is this value here. We want that to match up with the movement speed of our actual player, which is determined by this value here, movement speed. So in the future, we're going to do some more animations. We could have animations for jumping, which we'll do, animations for collectibles and these kind of things. But for now, I'm going to end because that's quite a lot of technical problems that can arise. So if you got this far, good job, because there's quite a lot of technical problems that can go wrong in terms of importing animations. So I just want to do a tutorial where we get animations into Unity and we get them working for our character controller. The next step will be adding more animations and then also trying to make sure that we can get your own animations in and in the right format, and that can also be quite tricky as well.